So tonight I'm going to continue to speak from where we left off. And where we left off was, we had talked about the four kinds of objects that arise, the physical objects of kaya, feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, painful, and so on, and mental activity and general objects such as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And in observing the rising and the falling of the abdomen, which is the primary object in sitting, we talked about how we have to try to catch it right at the beginning and carry the attention all the way through to the end. And when we look at it, if we can observe closely or not, that's the first thing to be able to report about. Can we observe it closely, keeping the mind there from the very beginning until the end? And if we can, then what is it that we observe or come to notice or know about the rising? And so we talked about the rising and the falling, which are the primary objects in sitting. It is the same way with the walking meditation. When we do the walking meditation, we put the attention on the foot, the lower leg, or the whole leg, and we observe stepping, or right step, left step, or lifting, moving, and placing. So when we put our attention on the leg like that, can we observe it closely or not? Starting from the very beginning of the movement of the step and keeping the attention on it through to the end. If we can observe it closely, then what is it that we come to notice? Is it the form of the foot, the shape of the foot, or the lower leg? Or is it the position that it's making the step? Or is it some quality, such as lightness or heaviness, stiffness, pushing? So whenever we describe a physical object, we should be able to mention one of these three things. We should notice on some level. That is, did we see the form of it? These are the three things that become the three ways in which we can see, mentally, a physical object when we do meditation. One is the form may become apparent. One is, the next level of seeing is the position. Like when we talked about rising and falling, that it's either expanded or collapsed. Or, for example, in the case of the hand, that it's open or it's closed into a fist. These are examples of seeing the position. Or there's true nature, which are the qualities like lightness, heaviness, and so on. So simply in order to be able to see on one of these three levels, you need to be able to look, you need to observe carefully. So in the case of observing the lifting, we try to catch the movement from the very moment the foot starts going up and keep our attention on it until the very end of the upward movement. And then after that, moving the foot forward, when we observe the moving of the foot as it goes forward, can we catch that right from the start of its forward movement until the end of the forward movement? And if we can observe closely like that, then what is it that we observe or notice? What do we see when we focus our attention on it? Do we see the form of the foot as it moves forward, or the action of the manner of its going forward? Or do we feel how it's being pushed from behind or pulled from in front? These are physical qualities. So we should try to be able to observe so that we can see on some level what is happening And when we look carefully, we should be able to say what we noticed. So, and the placing is what occurs as soon as the foot starts to go down. The forward movement stops and then the foot starts to come down. So when the foot starts to come down, we call that placing, all the way until it is resting completely on the ground. Can we catch that moment from the very moment that it starts to go down and keep our attention on it until it's completely placed? And when we observe like that, keeping our attention there, what is it that we notice about it? Do we notice the form of the foot, or its position of being placed? Or do we notice how it gets heavy and goes down? Do we notice heaviness, lightness? You may feel softness, you may feel hardness, tension, stiffness. So the yogi should be able to say what it is that he noticed about the placing. So this way of speaking about the practice is very important. Being able to express what happens when you meditate is very important. And so far we've talked about how to report the objects in sitting, the primary objects, and the primary objects in walking. Although I should add, in the walking, there's also at the ends of the path the standing posture, which is to place the attention on the whole body, observing standing, and also the turning as you turn around to go back in the other direction. And by just describing this much, most people will understand how to report whatever they experience. But there are some people who won't understand if it's not explained more fully. So we should also say that there are other objects, such as when you bend your arm, or you stretch your arm out, or lean, or tilt the head, or sit down from a standing posture, or, for example, when you get up and go to sit at a chair in the back. All these things have to be noted when we do them. And when these actions happen, can we observe them? We should try to observe them, and we should try to see, can we make our mind concurrent with the object? Can we make it in sync with the action that we're performing at the time? Does the mind reach the object that we're trying to observe? So these are things that, and if it reaches the object, then what do you notice about it? What quality or what level of observation do you have? Forget that last sentence. It's just mainly what do you notice about it? So it's very important to be able to describe what you do in the meditation practice, and what you notice when you try to place your attention on the various things. So we should be able to report beginning with the primary object of the rising and the falling, because our sitting practice begins with trying to observe this. We put our attention on the abdomen and we try to focus the mind on the movement of the rising from the very beginning to the end, and the movement of the falling from the very beginning to the end. So it's important to be able to begin our report with this primary object of the sitting. And it often happens that people skip over it. They say, I was noting rising and falling, and then, they don't talk about the rising and falling, but they go on to talk about something else that happened. And the rising and falling, or the primary object, is the main thing that we should try to describe accurately and not pass it over. And so that you can remember how to practice and how to report, there are a few verses, and just whatever you remember is okay. But in Burma they chant these little verses at the beginning of every single Dhamma talk, so that the yogis can remember about how to practice and how to report. So the first is tell about the rising, how you noted it and what you knew. Tell about the falling, how you noted it and what you knew. Object, noting, noticing. These 3 points are key. Include these 3 precisely, clearly, for each object seen. Can you follow closely, right when the object comes, steadfastly, concurrently? Can you note or not? If you can, say what was known, completely, truthfully. If you can't, whatever it was that happened, say how you noted it and what was known. And I can post this on the board afterwards so that you can look at it. So next I'd like to speak about 3 characteristics. This is something that every yogi should understand. There are 3 characteristics of anything that arises, either physical or mental. And the word in Pali for this is lakkhana. It means characteristic or distinguishing mark. So these 3 are the sabhva, S-A-B-H-A-V-A, lakkhana, or individual characteristic. Sankhata lakkhana, S-A-N-K-H-A-T-A, lakkhana, which is momentary characteristic, and samanya lakkhana, or common characteristic. So we have to understand that there are these 3 types of characteristics. So as was just said, the sabhava lakkhana is the essence or the unique quality of any given mental or physical phenomena. And I'll start by mentioning some characteristics of physical phenomena. So first of all, there's the earth element, called in Pali Patavi Dhatu. If we feel our body, when we feel a bony place, then we feel hardness or firmness. And if we feel some place that's fleshy, then we feel softness or squishiness. And these qualities, hardness, or on the other, hardness and firmness on one extreme, and softness and squishiness on the other, these are the quality of the earth element, Patavi Dhatu. And it's called the earth element because it possesses this quality of hardness or firmness, or on the other hand, softness and squishiness. This quality of hardness, firmness, softness and squishiness is only found in the earth element. And second of all, so when we feel this, we know, oh, this is the earth element. We don't have to label it that way, but this is something we can perceive in our body. We can feel hardness, we can feel firmness, softness, squishiness. These are examples of a natural characteristic. Then there's the element of temperature, which is called in Pali Tejo Dhatu, T-E-J-O. And it's commonly translated as the fire element. But in fact, it's not only heat, it's warmth, coolness, coldness. So, technically speaking, it's the element of temperature. So this is heat, warmth, coldness. This is only found in the element of temperature. It's not found, the earth element doesn't contain heat. It only contains hardness or softness. And then also there's the quality, for example, of flowing. This is characteristic of the water element, called Apo Dhatu. So flowing or solidity, stickiness, cohesion, these are all characteristics of water. And the air element, or Vayo, V-A-Y-O, has the quality of stiffness, or being tight, tense, pushing, movement. And this quality is only found in the air element. It's not found in the earth element, or the fire element, or the water element. So these are things we can recognize. There are also mental phenomena, and these have their own characteristics too. The mind has the quality of taking an object or knowing an object. For example, seeing consciousness knows the visible object, takes the visible object. Then there's the quality of contact, called in Pali phassa. This is a mind state. It arises together with the mind, and it colors the mind. Then there's also the quality of feeling, vedana, which has the quality of experiencing the object. And this also arises together with the mind and colors it. So we should understand that physical and mental phenomena each have their own individual qualities that are unique to them. And this is what is called sabhva lakkhana, or individual characteristic. The second type of characteristic is called momentary characteristic. So these qualities, such as just mentioned, heat, coldness, and all mental and physical qualities, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, or arising, duration, and dissolution. So there are these three moments in time. In Pali, the words for it are upada, titi, and bhanga. The moment in which something arises, then it heads towards dissolution, and then it dissolves. So all these things, heat, softness, hardness, cold, stiffness, tension, movement, knowing, contact, feeling, all these are natural characteristics of mental and physical phenomena, and they all have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this way of being marked by beginning, middle, and end is called the momentary characteristic, or sankata lakkhana. And it is because these things arise due to causes. So anything that arises due to causes has a beginning, a duration, and then falls apart. And third is the common characteristics. All mental and physical phenomena have some characteristics in common, and that is called samanya lakkhana. So after they arise, they disappear. There's a moment of hardness, it goes away. There's a moment of softness, it goes away. There's a moment of heat or cold, stiffness, tension, coolness, flowing, melting, stickiness. They happen and then they're gone. Seeing consciousness arises and it goes away. Hearing consciousness arises and goes away. Contact, feeling, they arise, go away. So there's nothing that arises and then stays that way. Whatever arises disappears after it's arisen. And that is common to all compound phenomena, all mental, physical phenomena. And the fact that it arises and then passes away is called the characteristic of impermanence, or anicca lakkhana. What arises and then passes away, is born and then dies, cannot be called satisfactory, can't be called good. So anything that is impermanent is also unsatisfactory, unreliable. And this characteristic of unsatisfactoriness is called dukkha lakkhana. This is common to all things that arise and pass away. And in addition, they arise and pass away on their own. We don't make them happen, we don't control them. they happen due to causes. When those causes are gone, they fall apart. So they just have their own process, their own nature. So we should understand that these characteristics of being impermanent, unsatisfactory, and without any type of inherent self, they permeate all physical and mental phenomena, and they're common to everything that we experience. So although there are these three characteristics, what we work with is sabhva, the individual characteristic. This is what we're trying to know this when we do the meditation practice. And how we have to observe in order to know the individual qualities is to observe at the very moment that they arise. So to observe at the very moment of arising means we place the attention on the abdomen, and when the breath happens, the abdomen rises. We can see that it really happens. Before the breath comes in, the rising hasn't appeared yet. But when the breath comes in, the rising happens. So this is the moment at which we have to watch. And same with the falling. There's the exhalation, and then the falling happens. So it's essential to observe at the moment of arising. This is another Vipassana slogan. To note at the moment of arising. Only then can one see sabhava for sure. If we don't observe at the very moment that the abdomen's rising occurs, we won't know sabhava, and we won't even know the shape of the abdomen or its position. So it's essential to try to observe at the moment of arising. So that's why we try to observe it from the very beginning until the very end. We try to catch it as soon as it arises, just simply to look at it, watch it. And when the mind falls on the object frequently enough, the concentration becomes good, and we start to see the true nature. And when the concentration is strong enough, then we don't see the form of the abdomen anymore. We don't see it being expanded. We just feel some qualities that are there, whether it is tightness or vibration or movement or whatever. And it's the same with the falling, that we have to focus on it closely. At the very smallest hint of the beginning of the falling until it comes to the end. And when we do that, eventually the mind will go past the form of the abdomen and the position of it being deflated. One has to observe again and again. When the abdomen falls, then when it relaxes, it becomes still. Just like a ball of air. If you poke a hole in it, it loses its tension and it flies about and it becomes still again. So this is the quality of air that we can feel when we observe the falling of the abdomen. So it's the same way when we observe lifting, moving, and placing in doing the walking meditation. We should try to observe each part from the very beginning of it. For example, from the very beginning, the foot lifts up until the time the upward movement stops. From the very beginning of the movement forward until just before it starts to go down. And then the dropping when the foot goes down until it's all the way placed. We should try to observe each part carefully. And if we do that, watching these small occurrences closely, then we will come to see the true nature that is there. So, what will we see when we practice in this way? The teacher is not going to give you the answer, but we try to tell you how to observe, how to look. And this is like telling someone the way to solve a math problem. The teacher doesn't tell the answer. They tell the student, this is how you work out the problem. So you try to solve it for yourself. And if you go through the steps, you'll get the answer. It's the same way with this. If you apply the practice, you will come to see. You will come to see what the true nature is of phenomena. So similarly with observing the primary objects, we have to observe the other movements that we make, such as bending, stretching, leaning, tilting the head, blinking the eyes, closing the eyes, opening the eyes, sitting down, standing up. And also, when there's hardness, softness, heat, cold, stiffness, tension, movement, aching, solidity, numbness, tingling, all these things should be focused on precisely when they arise. So the basic task is to observe at the moment of arising. And that's a simple way of saying, to observe at the moment of seeing, at the moment of hearing, and so on, at the moment of touching. Or to observe at the moment of heat, at the moment there is coldness, at the moment of stiffness, and so on. So this is basically the task, to note at the very moment of arising, so that we can see true nature, so that we can see sabhava. And all the actions, if we want to know the mental and physical qualities that each arise in their own time, then observe at the very moment that they arise. At the moment of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, bending, stretching, leaning, tilting the head, lifting, moving, placing. And when sitting down or standing up, there's the intention to sit down, the intention to stand up, the intention to bend, the intention to stretch. And if one observes these initiating mind moments also, at the moment that they arise, their qualities will become completely apparent. So when we meditate, we come to know sabhava. It's just like you will know, if I hold this up, this brochure up, if you look at it, you can see what it is. You can see if it's open or if it's closed, that is its position. You can see this object if I hold it up and you look at it. And it's the same way when we meditate. You keep on trying to look. And if you do this, focusing at the very moment things arise, trying to catch that moment of arising more and more. It's a learning process. So when you come to know sabhava, then gradually your knowledge will start to mature bit by bit. And when knowledge becomes mature, then you start to see how this quality that you've observed, the hardness or softness, whatever it is, you start to see that it has a beginning and it continues and it has an end. This compound or momentary characteristic only starts to become apparent after we see sabhava, the true nature or individual characteristic. If we don't see sabhava, we won't see this momentary characteristic. And seeing sabhava depends on observing the object at the moment that arises. So the momentary aspect, the beginning, middle, and end of things becomes apparent because of seeing the true nature, seeing sabhava, seeing that there's just hardness or heat or stiffness or tension. When the dissolution becomes apparent, then one understands how the object arises and disappears. So one comes to see its impermanent quality. And at the same time one, or by virtue of the same fact of seeing things that things dissolve, one also sees that they are unreliable or unsatisfactory, and that they behave like this just according to their own nature. So these don't become apparent unless one sees the passing away of the object. So impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and the selfless nature of phenomena don't become apparent unless one sees the rising and passing away of phenomena. So it is said only when Sankata appears will Samanya appear. We don't need to do anything special to make the momentary characteristic, beginning, middle, and end, become apparent. All we have to do is observe at the moment of arising in order to see the true nature. And following on seeing true nature, it will just follow that the momentary characteristic becomes apparent, and following that, the common characteristics of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and selflessness will become apparent. So if you can note the rising from the very smallest beginning of it until the end, you'll come to see about this for yourself, noting the falling as well as the other objects that arise in the body. They appear, there's noting, they disappear. Appearing, noting, disappearing. So as you do this, you will come to see for yourself the common characteristics that they have. And this is when Vipassana knowledge has begun, when the common characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness appear. Then Vipassana knowledge has begun. So this is the meaning of Vipassana, that it is knowledge that can see in the various ways that things really are. You can see how mental and physical phenomena arise, exist for a moment, and then dissolve, and are therefore impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not within our control. And after Vipassana knowledge begins, it gradually matures until one reaches the state of the arising of the noble path knowledge, and realization of Nibbana. So one should try to practice until this point, because the knowledge that we gain through the practice liberates us from suffering. So this talk is a way of paving the way for people who aren't familiar with the practice to become more familiar with it. And it's necessary to try to observe with a focused mind. And when you speak with the teacher about the practice, just to report how you observe and what you come to notice about the primary object and other objects. And simply say what you've come to see for yourself. It's not necessary to talk about things that you've read or that you think might have happened. What I mean is imaginary things, things that you're not really clear about, or that because of reading about them you may I don't want to say further about it.
Yeah.
So to summarize these last 2 nights of talks, there are only 4 things that occur in our being. They are bodily actions, or kaya, mind, feelings, like pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and other dhammas, like seeing, hearing, smelling. And there are 3 things to say about each of these types of object. What was the object? Looking at it, your observation or noting of it, and what you noticed. So what was it that arose? What object was it? How you noted it? That means you're looking at your observation of it and what you noticed about it. So for whatever arises in the practice, we can just say these 3 things. The arising of the object is nothing to do with us. It just arises on its own. We don't have to do anything to make the object arise. But when it arises, our concern is to look at it. So that's the second thing. And then when we look, what do we notice? So these are the three things to mention when you speak with the teacher. What was it that arose? You're looking at it, you're noting of it, and what did you notice about it? And a few things further, just that we have a time limit on interviews, but now we don't have so many yogis, so it's not a problem. But when there's a lot, you really have to choose what you're going to say, so that you can say it in 10 minutes, for example. And lastly, I hope that all of you will be able to make effort to walk the correct path according to the guidance given here, so that you reach the right destination and be able to practice satipatthana, because it expands the mind and increases our knowledge. And with this we can get a lot of benefit for having been born a human being, which is not easy to have, and to meet up with the teachings of the Buddha, which are rare to find. May you gain the knowledge and the good things that you so desire, especially Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.